The ravine was 5:30 in the morning on August 30, 2013. The sun was just beginning to bleed over the jagged silhouette of the Sierra Pelona Mountains, casting long, pale shadows across the arid landscape. The air was cool, carrying the scent of sagebrush and dry earth, a stark contrast to the scorching heat that would soon bake the valley floor. It should have been quiet near the main boat launch of Castaic Lake, California, peaceful even, save for the early chirping of birds or the distant hum of the interstate. But at the bottom of a steep brush-covered ravine, the silence felt heavy, unnatural, and wrong. A California Highway Patrol officer stood at the jagged edge of the embankment, looking down into the shadows. 25 feet below, a beige 2003 Toyota Highlander lay on its passenger side, wrecked and still settling into the dust. The vehicle had not merely drifted, it had careened off the access road with violence, tumbling down into the scrub oak in Manzanita. The officer navigated the steep slope with caution, his hand resting near his holster, his boots sliding on loose gravel. In his line of work, accidents on these winding recreational roads were often fatal scenes of tragedy. He reached the vehicle, expecting the metallic smell of blood or the silence of the dead. He peered inside the shattered cabin, where the airbags hung like deflated lungs. The rear window had been punched out from the inside, the safety glass shattered into thousands of glistening cubes scattered across the upholstery. There was a small smear of blood on the headrest and the passenger seat, suggesting an injury, perhaps a laceration from the crash or the escape. But there was no body. He saw a laptop computer still in its case. He saw a wallet containing identification and credit cards. He saw a duffel bag packed with clothes, ready for a weekend visit. What he did not see was a driver. Bryce Laspisa had left the building. He had crawled out of the wreckage of his life and walked into the vast, unforgiving landscape. Nearly 12 years later, despite one of the most intensive searches in Californian history, he has never come back. The Golden Boy. To understand how a bright, promising young man ended up at the bottom of a ravine, one must rewind 4 days to a life that looked, on the surface, perfectly normal. Bryce Laspisa was 19 years old, an only child with vivid red hair, a contagious smile, and striking blue eyes that friends said could light up a room. He was a graphic design student at Sierra College in Rocklin, just north of Sacramento, with a talent for visual arts and a future that seemed wide open. He had moved from Illinois to California a year earlier, a transition that can be difficult for many teenagers, but Bryce seemed to have adjusted well to the West Coast rhythm. He made friends easily, charmed his professors, and maintained a close, loving relationship with his parents, Karen and Michael. But as the fall semester of 2013 began, the lights in Bryce's eyes started to dim, replaced by a frantic, hollow exhaustion. His girlfriend, Kim Sly, was the first to notice the seismic shift in his personality. It wasn't just typical college stress or sophomore jitters. Bryce wasn't sleeping. He was drinking heavily, far more than usual, consuming hard liquor in quantities that alarmed those around him. But more concerning than the alcohol was his use of Vyvanse, a potent stimulant prescribed for ADHD.
Vyvanse is a central nervous system stimulant. When used correctly, under medical supervision, it aids focus and impulse control. When abused, taken in high doses or snorted, it keeps the user awake for days, flooding the brain with dopamine and norepinephrine. The side effects of prolonged sleep deprivation, combined with amphetamines, are terrifying. Paranoia, hallucinations, aggression, and a complete detachment from reality. On August 26th, Kim tried to intervene. Bryce had been awake for nearly 48 hours, his movements jittery and his speech rapid fire. "Bryce, you've been up for 2 days," she told him softly, fear creeping into her voice. "You need to sleep. You're not making sense." Bryce stared at the television, his eyes wide but unseeing, holding an Xbox controller he wasn't really using. The game was paused, but his mind was racing at 1,000,000 miles an hour. "I'm fine. I have a lot of energy. I have to burn it off. I can't turn my brain off." The spiral tightened on August 27th. Bryce broke up with Kim via text message. It was abrupt, cruel and cold, completely out of character for the sweet, affectionate boy she knew. "You're better off without me," he wrote, a message that read more like a warning than a goodbye. That night he drove to her apartment in a manic state. He wasn't there to reconcile, he was there to purge. He tried to give away his most prized possessions, his Xbox console, his favorite games, and a pair of diamond earrings his mother, Karen, had given him as a gift. In the psychology of disappearances and suicides, this behavior, giving away prized possessions, is a flashing red light. It is a sign of finality, a clearing of the decks before a planned departure or self-destruction. Kim refused to take them, recognizing the danger in the gesture. "I can't take these, Bryce. These are your mom's. What are you doing? You love these things." "I don't need them," Bryce replied, his affect flat, looking through her rather than at her. "I don't need any of this anymore. It's just stuff." Terrified, Kim called Karen Laspisa in Laguna Niguel immediately after he left. "Something is wrong with Bryce. He's not himself. You need to help him." The long pause. Karen and Michael Laspisa lived in Laguna Niguel, a quiet suburb in Orange County, roughly 400 miles south of Sierra College. Under normal circumstances, the drive down Interstate 5, the central artery of the state, is a straight shot, taking 6 or 7 hours. It is a drive millions make every year. Karen pleaded with her son over the phone to come home. She could hear the exhaustion and confusion in his voice. "Just drive home," she told him, trying to project calm. "Sleep in your own bed. We can fix this. We can talk about whatever's going on, but you need to be here." "I didn't mean to scare anyone," Bryce stammered, sounding like a frightened child rather than a college student. I'll leave tomorrow." But he didn't leave the next day. He remained in Rockland, hovering in a state of indecision. He finally departed late on the night of August 28th, driving his beige Highlander onto the southbound I-5. It should have been an easy drive, boring, flat, and endless, cutting through the agricultural heart of the state. He should have been home for breakfast on the morning of August 29th.
Instead, the drive that should have taken 7 hours was about to stretch into a 30-hour odyssey of inexplicable stops and catatonic stillness. At 9 a.m. on August 29th, Bryce ran out of gas in Buttonwillow, a dusty truck stop town famous only for being a place where travelers stopped to refuel and leave. He pulled onto Lagoon Drive, a paved road surrounded by dry fields, and simply sat there. He didn't walk to the gas station less than a mile away. He didn't call a tow truck immediately. He sat in his car, motionless, for 3 hours while the sun climbed high and hot into the sky, baking the interior of the vehicle. What was he doing during those hours? Was he sleeping? Was he hallucinating? Or was he paralyzed by the dread of returning to a life he felt he had ruined? Finally, around noon, 3 hours after stopping, he called a roadside assistance service. He didn't ask for a tow, he requested a specific delivery: 3 gallons of gasoline. The stranger on the road. Christian Castro, a roadside assistance technician, arrived at the scene at 12:30 p.m. Given the heat and the delay, he expected to find a frustrated college kid, perhaps angry about the wait or panicked about being stranded. Instead, he found Bryce lounging in the driver's seat, smiling. "Hey man, got your fuel," Castro said, approaching the window. Bryce rolled down the glass, a blast of air-conditioned air escaping the cabin. He offered a genuine, warm smile. "Thanks so much. I appreciate it, really." Castro later testified that Bryce appeared completely calm, coherent, and friendly. He didn't look drunk. He didn't look high. He didn't look like a person in the middle of a psychotic break or a nervous breakdown. He looked like a kid on a road trip. "You heading south?" Castro asked as he poured the fuel into the tank. "Yeah," Bryce replied. "Going home to see my parents. They're waiting for me." Then, the strange behavior resurfaced, shattering the illusion of normalcy. Bryce reached into his center console and pulled out the velvet box containing the diamond earrings, the same ones Kim had refused to take. "Here," he said, extending his hand to the stranger. "Take them, for the trouble." Castro hesitated, looking at the sparkling stones. "Man, these look real. Are you serious?" "They are," Bryce insisted, pressing the box toward him. "My mom gave them to me. I want you to have them. Please, do me a favor and take them." Baffled, Castro took the earrings. It was a surreal transaction. A young man unburdening himself of value, handing over family heirlooms to a roadside mechanic. Bryce had gas now. He was only 3 hours from home. The hardest part of the drive was over. But even after Castro left, Bryce didn't move. He sat in the sweltering buttonwillow heat for hours. He stared at the radio dial. He picked up his phone, looked at the screen, and put it down. He moved the car a few miles to a rest stop, and then parked again. Back in Laguna Niguel, Michael and Karen were frantic. Tracking his phone via the Find My Friends feature, they saw he hadn't moved from the Buttonwillow area since morning. It was now evening. The sun was setting. They managed to track down Christian Castro through the roadside assistance company. Castro told them about the gas delivery, the polite young man, and the diamond earrings. When Karen heard about the earrings, her blood ran cold. This wasn't just teenage rebellion or procrastination. This was a shedding of identity. Michael called the police. The interaction. Night had fallen, blanketing the Central Valley in darkness, when a Kern County Sheriff's deputy approached the Highlander. The flashing red and blue lights illuminated the dusty road, casting long, strobing shadows. They found Bryce exactly where the GPS said he would be, still sitting, still waiting. "Son, you okay?" the officer asked, shining a flashlight into the cabin. "Yes, sir," Bryce replied, politely, squinting against the beam. "Just resting." "You've been resting for 13 hours. Your parents are worried sick. They called us. Step out of the vehicle, please." Bryce obeyed. He stepped out onto the gravel. He walked a straight line, heel to toe. He followed the pen light with his eyes, his pupils reacting normally. He was sober. A search of the vehicle revealed no drugs, no alcohol, and no weapons. The police were left with a legal adult who simply didn't want to drive, which is not a crime. "Look, Bryce," the officer said, leaning against his cruiser, "we can't make you go home. You're an adult. But you can't sleep here on the side of the road. It's not safe. You need to make a choice. Call your mother." Under the officer's watch, Bryce dialed home. The relief in Karen's voice was audible even from a distance. "Mom, it's me. Yeah, I'm okay. I know. I'm sorry. I was just tired. Yes, I'm getting on the road right now. I'll be home soon." He sounded convincing. He sounded like he had snapped out of whatever trance had held him in Buttonwillow. The officers watched him get back into the driver's seat, start the engine, and pull onto the interstate, finally heading south. They watched his taillights fade into the distance. They thought the situation was resolved. They thought he was safe. They were wrong. The descent. It was now the early hours of August 30th. Bryce was driving the final stretch, climbing up and over the Grapevine, the steep mountain pass that separates the Central Valley from the Los Angeles Basin. But his behavior remained erratic. He spoke to his mother again at 1:50 a.m., telling her he was off the freeway on a secondary road looking for somewhere to stop. Why leave the interstate? Why navigate dark, winding back roads when the highway leads straight to home?
At 2:08 a.m., he made the final call. He was parked somewhere near Castaic Lake. His voice was exhausted, hollow, and stripped of all energy. "Mom, I'm going to pull over and sleep. I can't keep my eyes open." "Okay, honey," Karen said, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. She just wanted him safe. "Just sleep. Lock the doors. Call me the second you wake up. We love you." There was a long pause on the line. The silence stretched out, filled with unsaid words. Then Bryce spoke his final words to his parents, a cryptic promise that would haunt them for a decade. "I have something to tell you guys. When I get home." "What is it?" Karen asked, sensing the weight of the statement.
"Later," he said. "Just later." He hung up. Analysis of the crash site later revealed a disturbing trajectory. Sometime before dawn, Bryce turned onto the main boat launch road near Castaic Lake. The road is steep and curves sharply. He didn't drift off the road like a sleepy driver, gently grazing the guardrail. The tire tracks showed no skid marks, no desperate braking attempts. He accelerated. He aimed the heavy SUV toward the cliff edge and drove off the embankment at speed. The car tumbled 25 feet, smashing into the rocky terrain, shattering glass and crumbling metal. The airbags deployed. The frame twisted. But Bryce survived the impact. Investigators believe he sat in the wreckage for a moment, then unbuckled his seatbelt. He crawled into the back seat, seemingly uninjured enough to move. He kicked out the rear window to escape the mangled frame. He emerged into the darkness, alive, mobile, and alone. And then he walked away into the night. Ghosts in the water. For days, the area around Castaic Lake was transformed into a zone of intense operation. Helicopters circled overhead, their rotors thumping against the canyon walls. Divers in black wetsuits scoured the deep, murky waters of the lake, searching for a body that might have walked into the depths. Volunteers combed the brush, shoulder to shoulder, looking for a shred of clothing or a footprint. Tracking dogs picked up Bryce's scent at the crash site. They followed it with determination, down the access road, across the dam, and all the way to a truck stop on the other side of the lake. It was a long walk, nearly 3 miles. But at the truck stop, the scent simply vanished. It didn't trail off into the woods. It ended at the pavement. Did he get into a car? Did he hitch a ride with a trucker heading out of state? Or did the scent simply dissipate in the wind? 5 days after the crash, a horrific lead emerged that nearly destroyed the Laspisa family. A cyclist riding near Lake Hughes Road, just 3 miles from Bryce's abandoned car, smelled smoke. Firefighters responded and found a burning body in the brush. The news cycle exploded. Body found near search site. For an agonizing week, the Laspisa family lived in a state of suspended hell, believing their son had been murdered and set on fire. They waited for the coroner's confirmation, mourning a death that hadn't been confirmed. However, forensic odontology eventually identified the body not as Bryce, but as Lamond Miles, a 35-year-old man from South Los Angeles. Miles had been a victim of a gang-related homicide, his body dumped and burned in a random location that just happened to be near the search for Bryce. It was a cruel coincidence, a nightmare within a nightmare that offered no answers, only more pain, and a renewed, desperate hope that Bryce was still out there.
The open road. Years have passed. The posters have faded. The news cameras have moved on. But the questions remain as sharp as they were in 2013. The theories are few, and none offer complete closure. Some theorize suicide, citing the acceleration of the car toward the cliff. It fits the narrative of the giveaway, the depression, the final goodbye behavior. But if he intended to die, why kick out the window? Why survive the crash only to walk 3 miles to a truck stop? And if he walked into the lake later to drown himself,
Why did his body never surface, despite professional dive teams searching the water for weeks? Others believe he suffered a psychotic break induced by sleep deprivation and Vyvanse abuse. In this scenario, Bryce entered a fugue state, a rare psychiatric disorder where a person loses their memory and personal identity. He could be living homeless somewhere in California, wandering the streets of Los Angeles or San Francisco, unaware of his name, his past, or the parents who weep for him. There have been sightings, a redhead in a homeless camp in Oregon, a drifter in Texas, but none have been confirmed. And then there is the third possibility, suggested by his final words, "I have something to tell you." Did Bryce Laspisa stage his own disappearance? Was the secret so heavy, so shameful, or so dangerous that he felt he couldn't go back to his old life? Did he crash the car as a diversion, meet someone at that truck stop, and vanish voluntarily? It seems impossible in the digital age to disappear without a trace, but people do it. Today, the ravine is silent. The brush has grown back over the scars in the earth where the Highlander landed. Bryce Laspisa would be in his early 30s now. His parents, Karen and Michael, still live in the same house in Laguna Niguel. They have never changed their phone numbers. They keep the porch light on. They are still waiting for the call that never came. Somewhere in the dark, the drive continues.